Hello, I'm Kelsey, a misfit with a passion for crafting and creating. Hey there friends, welcome back to my little crafty corner of the internet. In today's video, I decided to try my hand at making my own miniature dishes out of paper. I've seen a few videos of people making tiny plates out of paper, and as someone who loves all things miniature, I obviously had to try it for myself. But I didn't want to just stop at plates, I wanted to go all in and see if I could make a whole set. Plates, mugs, silverware, and casserole dishes all out of paper. Most of the videos I've seen go for a very traditional China look, which is adorable, but I wanted to do something a little different. I've always been a huge fan of mid-century modern design. So that's the aesthetic I went for. To nail that mid-century modern look, I decided to create printables for myself, which I designed in Adobe Illustrator, basing everything off a real mid-century modern plate I found online as my inspiration. By the time I was done, I had designs for 2 different sized round plates, 2 different sized square plates, serving platters, casserole dishes, mugs, and silverware. A whole little collection. Once everything was designed and printed, I started assembling. This plate was the first piece I put together since everything else was based on it. Each plate printable has 4 parts: a front, a back, a middle, and a small ring. The ring is actually what gives the plate its shape, because real plates aren't completely flat. They slightly curve down towards the center. Sandwiching that ring between the front and back pieces is what helps create that dish shape and makes them look so much more realistic. To really emphasize the curve even more, I used a clay sculpting tool with a ball tip to press and form the shape. It makes such a difference. I used that same technique for all the plates. Next up were the mugs, which had a few more parts to work with. Each mug printable comes in 5 pieces: the outer wall, the inner wall, the 2 circle bottoms, and the handle piece. To assemble, I started by gluing the inner wall to the back of the outer wall, but leaving one end unglued, so the assembly tab could slip in between the 2 layers and stay hidden. Then I scored and folded the small tabs along the bottom of the outer piece down. I curved the whole thing into a mug shape and glued that tab between the inner and outer walls to close it up. For the bottom, I glued one circle piece over the folded tabs on the outside, then glued the second circle inside the bottom of the mug, which neatly hid all the tabs and gives it a clean, finished look. Now for the handle. I folded the small rectangle in half. Then bent it into a curved question mark shape and glued it right onto the seam of the mug. I repeated this whole process for each color. Next up were the casserole dishes, and these were by far the most complicated in the set. I designed 2 styles, rectangular and oval. And each one has 15 pieces, 2 for the base, 8 for the lid, 2 for the sidewalls, and 3 for the handles. To start, I folded all the small tabs along the inner wall piece down and glued it around one of the base pieces, forming it into a shallow box shape. Then I glued the second base piece over the bottom, covering all the tabs up for a clean finish. Once that was good, I glued the outer wall around the outside of the dish. The lid is where it gets a little more involved. I started by gluing the 2 largest lid pieces together back to back. Then I cut a small slit into each of the 3 smallest pieces. This is where the lid handle will pass through. The handle itself is a small pill-shaped piece that gets folded in half with the tabs folding outwards on each side. I slid the 3 smallest pieces onto the handle through those slits, then glued all 3 together as a stack. Next, I glued the 3 medium pieces together into their own stack, then centered and glued that stack onto the large base piece. On the other side, I centered and glued the small stack with the handle. That layering is what gives the lid that slightly domed, dimensional look. Finally, the side handles. Similar to the lid handle, each one is a pill-shaped piece that gets folded in half and then bent into an L shape before being glued onto either side of the dish. The oval casseroles follow the exact same assembly process, the only difference is the shape. The last thing to assemble was the silverware, which was honestly the easiest part. I printed small images of forks, spoons, and butter knives. Then glued a mirror image copy onto the back of each one, then bent them into their natural silverware curves. With everything assembled, it was time for the step I was most excited about, transforming these paper dishes into something that looked like ceramic. The best way I could think to do that was to coat everything in a thin layer of UV resin. It would add a hard, glossy shell on the outside. And honestly, I already had a ton of it sitting in my craft supplies, so it felt like the perfect material to use. I lined all the dishes up, hauled everything out to the garage, and got to work spreading on the resin. After what felt like forever, I finally had every single dish coated and cured. And for the most part, it worked beautifully. But I did run into one hiccup. Because I was doing so many dishes at once, some of them were sitting with resin on them for a while before I could get to curing them. And that extra time caused some of the ink to bleed a little. The color on a few pieces aren't quite as crisp as I wanted. I also probably should have sealed everything with a layer of Mod Podge first to protect the ink. But honestly, I was eager to just finish the project and I skipped that step. So, lesson learned. Even with those imperfections though, I still think they look really good. And honestly, the slight color variation might actually make them look more like handmade pottery, which I'm kinda here for. The very last finishing touch was adding a little gold paint to the edges. And with that, I think it's time for the final reveal. I'm so glad I pushed through and finished these, because there was a moment mid-resin when I genuinely thought I had ruined everything. Before they were fully cured, the discoloration looked really bad, and I was pretty discouraged. But I stepped away and came back the next day with fresh eyes, and realized they were not trash. They were actually really cute. Are they perfect? No, especially the yellow ones. But for something made entirely out of paper and UV resin, I think they're pretty impressive. So let me know what you think. Was this method worth it? And if you want to try making these dishes yourself, I'm offering all the printables for free. You can grab them using the link in the description below. If you're new here and you love miniatures, Barbie projects, paper crafts, and all kinds of creative DIYs, you're definitely in the right place. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what I make next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next crafty adventure. Bye!